Okay, man, are you ready to go?
I'm ready to go. Now, come on, now crank this motherfucker up.
Break it down like this.
Hello, Internet. Gino Grieco here again with another episode of Deep Listens, and today we're going to be discussing Loop Hero. Is it a game? We'll find out. Joining me to discuss this thing we put on our screens for hours and hours is Pete Busby. Hello, Pete.
Hello, everybody. What's going on? This is an interesting game, different than some of the other roguelites we've played. Fun fact for this week comes from the New York Times. This article's from their science section. It's called "These Ants Shrink Their Brains for a Chance to Become Queen." Yes, it's a very recent study. So these ants, what are they? They're Indian jumping ants. So when one of their queens die, they start these tournaments where they basically all fight to turn into new queens. And as part of turning into new queens, their brains shrink 20% and their ovaries balloon to 5 times their normal size. Interestingly, though, if they don't become queens, they can regrow their brains back to normal size. But that's not what makes this a fun fact, as interesting as all that is. Here's the fun bit. These soon-to-be queen ants, whose brains are 20% smaller than regular ants, are called, and I promise I'm not pronouncing this weird for the sake of the joke. I can't think of any other way you could pronounce it. They're called gamer gates.
Yep, I've heard of that.
Yep.
That clip was circulating on gamer Twitter for a bit, and there was also a lot of it-me sort of things. Just like, my brain shrinking 20% so I could become a queen. It-me.
Did they, this is how it's pronounced, right?
Yes, that is how it's pronounced. I choose to believe that they chose that name maliciously.
I hope so. That'd be great.
We are also joined, as always, by M. Palladino. Hello, M.
Hello. It's me.
Yeah, that ants. The idea of a jumping ant is horrifying enough, but the fact that we were able to learn this about their brains, also horrifying. What would scare you more, a fire ant, an army ant, or a jumping ant?
I mean, army ants or fire ants, the real hardcore ones, they, kill people sometimes.
Oh, they kill people.
Yeah. Probably them, I guess, because they swarm.
Are we talking about one ant, or are we talking about, multiple? Do we have to take it in a fight?
This is not one bear versus 100 babies. I'm talking about the concept of a fire ant, a army ant, or a jumping ant. Because at least if I'm off the ground, I feel like I'm safe from an army ant or a fire ant. Jumping ants, they got ups, I guess.
It's true.
That sounds horrifying.
There's something super hardcore, though, about, I think fire ants, maybe it's the army ants that do this, is where they need to, cross water.
Yes.
They create a ball of ants and just float it. So they're just yeah, all you on the bottom, you're dead now. That is hardcore.
They make bridges out of themselves, army ants.
Yeah, that's nuts.
By their powers combined, they make a bridge. Ugh. All right, enough horrifying bug facts. Now I'm thinking of Mexican jumping beans. This is your fault, Pete. Ugh. Time to get into our normal housekeeping. Reminder, you can get in touch with the show at DeepListensPod on Twitter, deeplistens.libsyn.com. We have our comment sections and deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. We do not have any emails this week. However, some sort of bot has been posting on our YouTube videos, and every time it's a link to what I assume is hardcore pornography. So,
good guess.
We're on the up.
So if you would like to see some of that, go to our YouTube channel and look in any of the comment sections.
We're providing a
That's
public
true.
service, finally.
Type Deep Listens into YouTube. You'll get our playlist, and then you can get all of our episodes. You can listen to it there. It counts.
Do you think it's the deep part that's attracting porn bots?
I hope so. Or it's the listens part, and it's just a lot of, out-of-work sex line workers. So, That's our housekeeping. You can also support the show on patreon.com/deeplistens. If you do so, you'll get access to our Discord, where you can talk with the hosts and post all sorts of things. And if you did that, you might end up on the Discord report.
The Discord report. This week on the Discord report, we had the GBCer. That was 2 weeks ago now.
Yeah, and we had so the Giant Bomb Community Endurance Run happened 2 weekends ago, though last weekend we had a Giant Bomb Community Endurance Run encore because we were $1,000 away from our goal, and we were like, that's so close. We can get that in an afternoon or something. So we had a tight little show last Saturday, I believe it was the 17th, where like everyone just did an hour, just a tight little hour, and we didn't have multiple streams going at once. It was honestly refreshing. It was so simple. But yeah, we had a good time. I did my ladder climb, starting from the lowest of the low of Final Fantasy TCG players, which was ZP, working my way up to actual factual United States World's representative, Chocobo Joe. I beat my first 4 opponents, and then I punted my 5th game like I had it in the palm of my hands, and I just screwed it up. And so I lost, and then the 6th game I just lost. That was it was a close game and just did not work out in my favor. But yeah, that was fun. Then we had the Final Fantasy II 10-hour race between ZP and I. I won on a technicality, I believe.
Woo! The best way to win.
Yeah.
What was the technicality?
So I got decently far into FF2, and my sister, who is over, Noelle, friend of the show, on the show occasionally, she was over being moral support, and she said, please stop playing it, please. And ZP was like grousing about how he was playing it and complaining and wanting to quit. I was like, well, if no one's enjoying this, I guess I can just stop. So I just started playing loose. I was like, if I die, I die, but I'll keep trying to make progress. And so after I died, there were still 2 hours left on the clock, but I just started playing Pajama Sam instead, because ZP said do that. And apparently ZP then kept on playing after he told me to stop playing, and he might have caught up to me. Unclear if he actually did.
I mean...
But he basically told me not to play anymore, so...
I was watching his stream, and he was not making very much progress. I do not think he actually caught up, but I did not see the end of that stream, so I could not say.
Yeah, it sounded like he was catching up towards the end, but I stopped playing, so that kind of made it null and void. And then Sunday, we played Roller Coaster Tycoon, and murdered a lot of people.
So many people.
Yeah, so the VODs are available on twitch.tv/zombiepie and twitch.tv/thatpinguino if you want to see anything that happened over the GBCER. The Roller Coaster Tycoon stream was very fun. We came up with prompts to encourage ZP to build parks according to certain specifications, like one park where he had to maximize food revenue, but he was not allowed to hire janitors or build bathrooms. One where he was meant to maximize revenue from rides, but every ride had to be fatal, so single shot. Apparently people don't like riding a ride after someone's died on it, which presented problems.
Weird.
But we found a neat trick on how to do that. Apparently if you make the park free, you advertise it heavily, and you lock the doors after people come in, they will eventually ride the rides. They will watch someone die, and after a while they're like, well, I'm waiting around anyway. I might as well.
Yeah, at this point it's probably like, okay, which fate is better? Slowly starving to death in this locked park, or just riding the roller coaster of death?
Ride the death coaster.
What are the chances it'll happen again?
Yeah, I mean the best part was, I think our most efficient ride was one of those death drop sort of rides. You know, it takes you up and then it drops you down.
Yeah, like Tower of Terror style.
Yeah, Tower of Terror style, but he didn't cap the top. Yeah. So it just went up and then shot in the air.
I mean, it still drops.
It does drop, and sometimes it drops onto the crowd, and that's always fun. Yeah, and we had one where he had to overlap 6 rides onto the same square. Pete, I think that was submitted by you.
Nice.
We also did Oops All Scramblers. He made a park with nothing but scramblers.
I think it's the best ride.
Yeah, so check that out.
What is the scrambler?
What is the scrambler? Pete, describe a scrambler.
So the scrambler, Mike Birbiglia actually has a really good skit where he talks about scramblers. Just to give him a plug, he could use it. But It's basically a series of concentric circles. So you have a big circle on the outside, and that spins each individual little scrambler, and then each scrambler has a chair in it that also spins. So it's like 3 layers of spin all at once.
Oh God,
Yeah,
It's pretty good.
It just
It's like
makes you real
teacups, but
nauseous.
more intense.
that sounds like something that I would never ride, because I would see that and be like, that would just make me sick. I'm not going to do that.
It's the best part of the carnival. It's getting sick.
It's true. So after everything all was said and done, we raised $15,410 for Pencils of Promise, though the donations are still open if you want. So if you search Giant Bomb Community Endurance Run 11 Pencils of Promise, you will find it. And it's amazing. It's so cool year after year seeing the GBCR grow. I remember when it was hard for us to raise $2,000 as a team, and now we had 3 separate people raise over $2,000 and another 4 raise over $1,000, and then no one raised less than $200, which is wild for me, having done this now for 5 or 6 years to see how much it's grown. So thank you to everyone who participated, thank you to everyone who donated, and thank you to everyone who watched. It was a blast. We'll do it again next year.
But the most important part of ZP and you, who raised more.
I did by $3.
Oh,
Nice.
I got to
Yeah.
donate $4 to ZP now.
Damn it.
I'll be right back. Hold on.
Ugh. Well, now it is time for a feature that I have been... Honestly, I've dropped the ball the last couple of weeks. It's time for my obsession of the week, and I have 2 obsessions. And both of them center on one Jason Alexander. This acclaimed actor. Acclaimed McDonald's spokesman, Jason Alexander. First off,
He was in Shallow Hal.
I've been watching Seinfeld. What? What was that, Pete?
I don't think you can be an acclaimed actor if you were in Shallow Hal. I think it invalidates you forever.
He was in Shallow Hal?
Yeah, he was Jack Black's best friend. He had a tail.
Oh.
Yeah, not a good movie.
No, but honestly, I feel like he should do more, but that's besides the point. First off, I've been watching Seinfeld, and I want to emphasize this first off. What I'm about to say is played off as a joke in almost all of the episodes of Seinfeld where it is addressed, but looking back on it, I'm impressed. George Costanza's like very clearly a bisexual character, and they did not, like, they play it up for laughs, like, ha ha ha, he's attracted to men sometimes in episodes, and him being like, they always play it off as a crappy joke, but seeing any bisexual representation in Seinfeld at all was very odd to me, and it felt ahead of its time in some way, even though every moment they handled it was terrible for the most part. It happens in 3 separate episodes, so I know that it's not, they at least meant it a little bit. Yeah, so that's one thing. Bisexual icon, George Costanza. All of his relationships end terribly because he's terrible. And then the second thing is my shout out for Roger and Hammerstein's Cinderella, the Whitney Houston and Brandy vehicle from the 90s, which is now on Disney+, so I got to see it for the first time. And let me tell you, that movie is a doozy. Have either of you ever seen that film?
It's a classic. Yes. It's very good. I got to rewatch it, actually.
You should.
It's on Disney+, so I was going to hook that up at some point.
My favorite part is the terrible CGI and the part where Whitney Houston becomes a rocket ship at the end.
I forgot about that. That sure does happen.
It sure does happen, and then a bunch of, like, Windows 95 GIFs fall out of her legs. Like, her magic looks like a Windows 95 screensaver. It's amazing. If you haven't seen that film, check it out. It's very good. Whoopi Goldberg's in it. Jason Alexander's in it. It's great. So without further ado, let's go into Loop Hero. Em, you picked this. You did this to us. What's Loop Hero?
Loop Hero is a Devolver Digital game where you are a hero and you're going to go around a bunch of loops.
So it's a Roller Coaster Tycoon spinoff?
I guess it could be. Basically, automated combat, and you're progressing at a pretty regular pace around this loop. The interaction that you do as the player is setting tiles and your equipment. So you can give your hero a sword or armor or a shield, and you can also decide what features you will find along the loop, such as a cemetery or forests on the outside of the loop, stuff like that. And that determines how you progress or what enemies you're going to fight. as you are going through the loops. And then at the end of a set timer, you fight a boss. And then if you beat that boss, you get a bunch of resources that you then build a camp with. And that's the whole thing.
So it's loops on loops. The gameplay, you are walking in a loop. You kind of build the world under your feet. You get resources that then when you die, or you can retreat back to camp, you then can do a little base building, a la an XCOM or something like that. You're building structures that give you access to more tiles or more upgrades, and then those make it so you survive longer in your loop, and on and on and on. I think it can't be emphasized enough that when you're playing this game, you're not playing. All you're doing is setting tiles and equipping your character. Everything else happens automatically.
You can also pause the game. So you can also pause the game if you want to tactically choose where you're going to place things. This is, I guess, sort of generous on their part. It could have just been constant
movement,
which would have been mean, but that's basically the whole thing. Spacebar to pause and then set the tiles with the mouse. And other than that, you're just looking at stats.
Yep. You're pretty much just kind of watching the gameplay itself. You get weapon drops. There are 3 different character classes when everything's unlocked, right? 3? Or is there a 4th one?
Yeah, I haven't found any other ones.
Yeah, so the main character class, or I should say your first character class, the knight, gets weapons by killing enemies. When you kill an enemy, there's a random chance they will drop an item, and it could be a tile that you can place, or it could be an item you can equip. The second class, the rogue, which you can unlock. The rogue collects trophies, which then get turned in when you get to the end of the loop. So the rogue, instead of slowly accruing items, the rogue kind of always gets it in one big burst, which I found very annoying.
I like that. I don't know.
You like that?
You didn't like that?
No, I preferred getting the items slow and steady.
I just liked it more because I could leave it running through the loop, and then I had it set to pause at the end of the loop. So as soon as it got to the end, I would have all my stuff from the loop, and then I would just throw it onto the character. It was even less thought than actually going through and making those decisions in the moment.
You know, honestly, I hadn't thought about the sheer convenience. How did you you can set a breakpoint, I guess?
Yeah, in the settings, you can turn on, there are settings for, you can turn on stopping at the end of combat. There was one other one, and then the last one is stop at the end of a loop, so that it gives you a moment to think about it before you turn it back on. And so I basically turned off all the other ones because stopping at the end of every single combat was super annoying. But then because I was playing as the rogue, I wanted to accrue all of my items at the end and then plan accordingly once the loop was finished.
Yeah, so the 3 classes, there's the knight, the rogue, and then the necromancer. So the knight is really balanced, has good HP, has good defense, deals decent damage, very straightforward. The rogue has bad defense, and instead of boosting defense, it more boosts evasion. So it's more of an evasion-based class, and it has some lifesteal by default, but you can't really boost your lifesteal with the rogue. And then the necromancer is a summoned unit class. You just keep summoning skeletons, and then they will fight and die for you. What was everyone's favorite class? So, Em, you said the rogue because it required the least amount of attention. Pete, what about you?
So I started mostly warrior for basically the same reasons. Pretty straightforward grab-and-go class. I did enjoy playing the necromancer more, just because it's more interesting. You can summon stuff, but I never really feel like I got a good handle on it, you know?
Yeah, I enjoyed the necromancer in theory, but then I would run into bosses or specific enemies that would kill my skeletons faster than I could summon them. And the necromancer, if you have no skeletons, will always choose to summon a skeleton as its first action. So if the skeletons die too quickly, you actually do nothing. Whereas a warrior and a rogue will just at least whittle down the enemy. So it's just a very different style, you know? Like the necromancer, when everything's going well, you're taking basically no damage and you're dealing with everything. When things are going bad with the necromancer, you do actual nothing. You just die.
Yeah, you basically have a shield with the necromancer. It's part of the necklace, actually, that gives you a buffer. And then as soon as that goes down, you're taking health damage. And the necromancer does not have a ton of health. It can get pretty rough once you have no skeletons to take damage for you. So I wasn't a huge fan of that. With the Arsenal, I believe it's called, you could get a necklace on the rogue because it adds another equipment slot. And so the rogue with that magic shield just becomes a tank pretty much. You could get a wolf as well as an upgrade.
Yep.
And then there's a chance that the wolf will spawn into combat, which will also provide a buffer for you. And so rogues will just do a lot of damage all at once. Their evasion is really high, and there's ways that they can mitigate their damage. So it was pretty good. I didn't find much play with the Necromancer, but Warrior was also okay. It's just basic stuff.
Yeah, I just found that for most of the classes, you can get different weapon types, right? Like, at first, they just have damage or defense or HP buff, depending on whether you're looking at a sword, a shield, or a piece of armor. As you keep getting further and further into your run, you will get higher level equipment, and some of that higher level equipment will have passives kind of built into it. So things like magic damage, which just augments your damage output. Damage all, which will again increase the amount of damage you do and will hit all enemies whenever you make contact with something. There's attack speed up, defense up, HP regen, vampirism, which will heal you for as much damage as you're dealing, depending on how, and it's based on a percentage. So you kind of get used to all these different types of upgrades that you can get access to. And I found that maybe 3 of them were useful in my experience. 5. I would say 5. I cared about, at least for the warrior, magic damage because it was a damage buff, damage all because it was a damage buff, vampirism because it meant you didn't die, health regen because again it meant you were more survivable, and attack speed. And attack speed was more important than all the other stats put together, at least in my experience, because any other upgrades you have, they stack based on attack speed. Like if you have 9 extra damage but you're hitting twice as fast, it's like you have 18 extra damage. If you have vampirism 16% but you're hitting twice as fast, it's like you have 32%. If I could just get my attack speed as high as possible and then tack on whatever additional buffs, because you can get pieces of armor and weapons that have multiple passives at a time, up to 4 different types of passives, I think 3 or 4. You could just kind of proc those extra ones pretty frequently, and I would try to emphasize the tiles that would increase your attack speed as well. Did either of you have different strategies for making progress? Because that was how I beat most of the bosses that I beat.
Yeah, mine was generally the same. I mean, I tried to emphasize health as much as possible, so vampirism and regen, just because it's mostly a war of attrition, you know what I mean? And like the other way to do that is just to kill things fast enough that they don't hurt you, which seems generally the way you went, Gino. But I mean, it was all about trying to maximize runtime, obviously. I mean, the game's called Loop Hero.
Yeah.
Yeah, I pretty much went into attack speed as well. One of the strats with the rogue is to just get a lot of forests, which raise your attack speed, and then get as many of those as possible. And then there's a way to turn them into forests that are on fire, which raises your magic. And so you get a lot of attack speed early on, and then you can burn those forests to get a lot of magic when you need it later in the run. And so that was pretty much my strategy as soon as I unlocked all of those components. And the only other thing that I would prioritize would be the magic shield, if I had a necklace, because that was always really good. Attack speed, sometimes crit. Like if you can get your crit really high, you will do like exponentially more damage. And evasion. I also got tons of evasion for my rogue, which in one run I had it as high as like I think 75 or so.
Crap.
So like nothing could hit me, and if it did, it was going against my shield or something. So it's pretty good.
Yeah, so all of these strategies that we are talking about right now, it just takes a ton of effort and just runs, to get these runs. There's not a lot of actual interactivity beyond placing tiles and picking what weapons to equip. And you don't have a lot of control over what weapons you get or what tiles you get. You're pretty much just reacting. And at a certain point, I felt like I was being programmed. Like I was just walking through an algorithm. I was always placing the tiles in generally the same area. I was picking the same types of weapon over and over and over again. And it felt like my outcomes were less reliant on what I did as a player and more based on what the random number generator threw at me. Like, did I get a run where I got a lot of good weapons? Yes, then I got to the boss. Did I get a run where I didn't get that? I just kept, instead of, tiles that boosted my stats, I got tiles that made hellacious enemies. In that case, maybe I died really quickly. Did I get a passive that's worth a damn? Because there's a leveling system in this game, because of course there is. And if the levels, just presented me with 3 buffs that were terrible, I just wasn't going to go very far versus, getting one of the really good buffs. So I never felt especially engaged in this game, though I played a good amount of it, quote unquote. This is a game that I feel really torn about it because it's too active to be a passive clicker game, but it's too passive to be engaging, I found. Pete, did you have a similar experience?
Yeah, I mean, the game tries to sort of get a little bit more, let's say, mileage, so to speak, from like deck building as well. But like that only takes you so far when the runtime is basically loops. You know what I mean? Like you build your deck, but then it's all about sort of what you get in that RNG deal after that. I like min-maxing as much as the next guy, but I didn't find like too much to hold me, let's say.
Yeah, like there's an artifact system, you're building out your town, you're upgrading weapons, you can choose what tiles show up in your runs, but doing all of that stuff, the base gameplay is still walking in a circle and placing tiles and equipping items. And when that's the crux of your game, it has limited mileage for me. And what did you think?
Yeah, I agree with that. I kind of like it as a microcosm for like a RPG game, but I feel like, I guess it does have depth, but we'll discuss some of the secrets you can get into later on. But it's not enough, I think. I think there needs to be some more player interaction if it's going to hold up to some of these other more idle games, because it didn't feel as though I was doing anything out of the scope of like place tile, put equipment on. And so it did feel like one of those like cookie clicker, that sort of game where it should just be running in the background. But if you try to run in the background, it will go into the pause menu. So you can't even do that.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, as someone I've continued playing Final Fantasy Opera Omnia. Like, they've given Auto Battle and Auto Battle Plus, which, like, Auto Battle's even better than the Auto Battle does. And, yeah, those are also things that you, like, hit a button and then the game plays itself. But I maybe hit a button once every 30 seconds to a minute, and then at the end of maybe 5 minutes, I'm done. This game, a single loop will probably take 5 minutes, and I need to be paying just enough attention to where I don't die, but not enough attention to realize what I'm doing with my life and my finite existence on Earth.
There are also like a lot of bonuses that reward you for taking longer, which like seems counterproductive. Like the warrior fighter, what's his name again? Fighter, warrior.
Knight, I don't know.
Knight, whatever.
Generic
that class,
character.
You get stat buffs for when fights go longer. Like you accrue more resources and all that stuff. Like the game wants you to take your time.
Yeah, it's too active to be a nice passive game like a cookie clicker, and it's too passive to be engaging for me. Like, I found that the perfect time to play Loop Hero was when I was watching someone's Twitch stream or helping out with someone on the GPCER, because I could be talking to them and then occasionally absent-mindedly switching my weapon to the one that boosts attack speed. But even then, it's just like, that's so specific. Like, if I'm watching a show, I wouldn't want to be playing Loop Hero, because then I can't pay enough attention to the show. It has to be something like maybe you're talking to someone, so your brain is occupied with that, but you've got just enough processing power to play this game. There are a lot of idle games and, games of this style which lend themselves much better, I think, to second screen activity than Loop Hero does. So, Em, what did you think on kind of the level of activeness?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, there are other games that were a little bit more on the active front. I did like some of the more player decision making, if I wanted to burn all my forest in order to get magic damage instead of attack speed. There are some interactions like that where it felt interesting to discover, because I didn't look at any guides or anything. I was just going in blind. And so a lot of that was neat to figure out how combinations are made. Things like if you put a bunch of mountains in a 3x3 square, it becomes a big mountain, and then that makes like harpies, and you get more resources because of it. And so things like that were cool to discover, but once you sort of know what the trick is, you'll just do that every single time.
Yep.
So it just becomes part of the algorithm, basically. If that's part of your strategy, then, there's no reason not to do it. So, I don't know. It's a strange, I'm trying to think of other games that do this sort of thing and how they tackle, player agency in what is effectively just, going through the motions of a genre. Can you think of any that are, close to this?
Well, not any that... So, specifically when you said that this game did a good job of kind of summing up an RPG in a short little bite, it reminded me of Half Minute Hero, which, have you ever played that game?
Yeah.
That game does what this game does much better. They compress an RPG story into 30 seconds. And, RPG combat is basically, are you strong enough to fight the boss? Yes, no. Mm-hmm. And if you're not strong enough to fight the boss, you have to run into enemies. And the battles are just your character running face first into
just
enemies.
Slamming into them.
They just fly out of the way. And you need to, solve quests really quickly. And the whole mechanic is, you need to get money so that you can rewind time, because even though the whole run is 30 seconds, you need more than 30 seconds to actually do everything you need. So it's breakneck pace. It's a parody too. The storylines are always very funny, very well written. And it skewers the genre much better because it's not a roguelike.
Yep.
Right? They're trying to tell a linear story, so they made levels that were engaging every time. I'm not just doing the same thing over and over and over again. I think Minute is another one. We played that for the podcast.
I don't know that one.
So that was, we played it maybe 2-3 years ago. Pete picked it.
Did I? I don't even remember that one.
Minute, it's not necessarily, it's like an adventure game, almost like a Link to the Past or like a Legend of Zelda game, with every run is a minute long.
Okay.
And some objects would progress forward in time from run to run. So you would open up, not fast travel, you'd open up shortcuts. You'd make progress linearly. Your character would, get wiped back to the beginning, but certain elements of the world stay persistent. So that one also feels like a cool little design.
You mean Dark Souls?
Damn it. No, I don't. I mean The Legend of Zelda, Link to the Past. But yeah, that's another one that's kind of a microcosm. It's run-based, but again, it's linear. It's trying to tell a specific story. Slay the Spire, which is another game we've played on this show. At a certain point, you find out what the good runs look like, and you just always aim towards those. But at least there's this drafting element to that, and you can find novel ways to play that game. This game, I never found anything especially novel outside of the, handful of times where I discovered a new combination of tiles.
I feel too, the examples you're giving, Gino, games that sort of progress on each other, I feel like this is a problem roguelites, or roguelikes both really, have, in that they need to justify this mechanic. So I think that's one thing that Hades, why Hades got so much love, is it made the most sense in terms of, why do you have to keep repeating these runs? Whereas this one's the Lich destroyed all reality, and you sort of remember things as you go, which just seemed like a very strange and confusing premise to me. I don't feel like they justified their loops well enough.
I will say, as far as the justification goes, I was sort of a little more lenient with it, I think, because I don't know if you've ever played the board game Kingdom Death,
no.
Either of you.
No.
It basically has this same premise where you kind of wake up in this dark space. I imagine that they sort of drew some from this game. You don't have language. You're basically fighting against monsters, venturing out from your little home base in order to procure resources, and then fighting bigger and bigger things. Feels very similar to this game. I want to know if they actually played that before they built this game, because it was a very popular board game. It was one of the most funded Kickstarters ever made. Very intricate models. So they kind of share a conceit, I guess. Mm. And so I was like, okay, they're doing Kingdom Death. I guess that's fine. We'll see where it goes. And then it just kind of didn't go anywhere.
I just assumed it was a Adventure Time thing. Whenever I see Lich, I just always think Adventure Time.
Fair.
Yeah, the story did nothing for me. It's an interesting conceit that you're creating reality over and over and over again. Trying to, claw back this world that's been destroyed. But it's just not, I don't know. We played Hades, you know, like a linear story being told through a roguelike, and that one just did it way better.
Mm-hmm.
This game, I mean, you can go, minutes to hours between getting any story out of this game, depending on how well you do in the runs?
I guess it depends if you count, like, unlocking village pieces of story.
I don't.
Nah.
It's usually a villager who comes up to you and goes, you built the thing I need.
Here's my personality trait. I was a sailor. You know all you need to know now.
I like that one guy that gives you recipes if you
The-
make, like, the fire,
cook.
I think. Yeah.
He had the best line in the game.
What was that?
When you, like, first get him, and he's
Mhm.
like, do you know what the difference is between a good chef and a bad chef? I'm like, ooh, a riddle. What? He's like, a good chef's food tastes better.
Yep.
I was like, thanks, guy. I guess we haven't invented riddles again yet.
I was very surprised with how intricate some of the art was for these characters that you see, like, maybe twice.
Oh, yeah. There's some detailed character portraits, and then those characters just never return. There's
Yep.
no way to even, like, look at them again unless you upgrade the place, and then they have another 2 lines.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know that I have much more to say about Loop Hero, except this is one of those games where I guess this isn't difficult so much as you just need to keep doing loops until your character gets better stats so that you can survive for longer. Like, there's not much beyond the random number generators and placing tiles to a run. Like, there's not actually any other interaction, really, for the most part. So I don't know how to gauge the depth of a game like this. Because, like, you could play it for 100 hours, but the only thing you need to do is make your numbers go higher so that your runs don't end so quickly. And you will eventually, by sheer attrition, beat all the stuff. If you're better or worse at this game, what happens? Like, do you beat it 10 hours sooner?
Yes, I mean, what's the optimal run strategy, too, I guess? Like, what did you guys do with your placements?
I divided things into quadrants. So, like, the outer rim would be trees and meadows and deserts kind of interlaced, because the meadows give you twice as many resources if they are adjacent to something that isn't a meadow. I would stack all of my mountains in a corner, so they'd make the giant mountain, and then mountains and rocks get bonuses for being adjacent to other mountains and rocks. So you kind of want to leave those in a corner. If I got a treasury, I would put it next to the desert forest meadow zone, because those did not have any sort of specifications as to where they needed to be placed, whereas you want unbroken mountain ranges. I would put beacons in the middle, because that would cause them to overlap with the most amount of track.
Yeah, it makes so much sense.
I'd put a village at first diametrically opposed from my campfire, because that heals you. So you want the healing halfway, as far away from your base healing as possible in the loop. And then I would usually put the subsequent villages even further after the previous one, so that I could get a little bit of extra healing. I avoided certain tiles, like the swamp, like I just never used because it seemed bad.
Swamp is horrible. The swamp makes your healing hurt you, which can get pretty rough if you have a lot of vampirism or regen, because whenever you pass over a swamp tile, it will start to hurt you, which I don't know why you would want it.
Yeah, and the mosquitoes that spawn in the swamp have high evasion, so they just lock you in combat for a really long amount of time.
Yep.
The trick I found was that for swamps, if you put a vampire mansion next to the swamp, vampires give vampirism to all their allied units, so it causes the vampire and the mosquito to kill themselves because they're on fire.
Oh, that's smart.
But, like, what would you do? Basically your stuff checks out with my stuff, Gino. But what would you do? Would you try to, like, I was always trying to space enemies out. Like, I never wanted them all coming at me at once.
Same, and I would generally, like, there are lamps that will cause fewer enemy units to be on a tile. I would always put those next to goblin camps, because goblins were the most dangerous enemy type I found.
Goblins suck so bad.
And they get enraged.
They get enraged, they hit really fast, they're just messed up. So I would generally save you also have this Oblivion tile that lets you just wipe out a tile. I would save that for late in runs where I was just like, oh, this goblin stack is 4. Let me just blow them away instead of fighting them.
Let me just Armageddon these goblins.
Yep, that's the way to do it. I actually, I cut a bunch of the starting tiles, like the mountains and the meadows, I sort of passed over in favor of the forests and the deserts, which was just more because I was playing the rogue and kind of wanted the attack speed over health, because at a certain point, if my evasion was high enough, it didn't matter how high my health was. And then some of the other tiles that I use pretty frequently, I liked as many villages as possible, just because every time you pass through those, you heal. And then they also spawn monsters, because scarecrows will spawn in the fields that you can put next to them.
Yep, scarecrows are no joke.
Yeah, and then I liked ruins were rough because they spawn a worm that you might not even kill if you fight it, and it can also hit you from adjacent tiles. So if you put a bunch of ruins next to each other, it could get pretty dicey. I liked outposts because that gave you another ally that could attack tiles in a cardinals next to it. So I would put those where it would hit 3 tiles at once, and then layer those as much as possible. That pretty much got me until the 4th stage.
Yeah, and it's interesting because like a lot of those decisions were the same as mine, and there are clearly tiles that are advantageous for actually doing well in a loop, because you can just pick tiles that are just less difficult than other tiles or more useful. And then there are tiles that you feel you need to do for the roguelite, so you can get the resources you need to build the structures so that you can get more things so that you can upgrade the structures.
Yeah. One of the resources that I needed was a resource that only drops if you are fighting more than 4 monsters, and so I cut the beacons out pretty quick. Like, that was one of the few things that I was like, okay, I'm gonna plan for this. But otherwise, I was just getting what I needed. That was the only thing that was impeding my progress at any given point. Just because early on, you don't want to be in a combat with, like, 4 or 5 monsters because they will mess you up. But once you know how to deal with them, you're kind of aiming to get as many monsters in a tile as possible.
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, I mean, it felt like to me the difference between the runs was largely RNG and whether I was trying to actually complete the run or whether I was just going on a run for resources. And it just takes a lot of time to make progress in this game. You need a lot of those roguelite elements to line up for you so that you can make good use of each of your runs. I don't know. I left with a weird feeling about this game. Like, it was very low impact. It's hard to get mad at a game that requires this little of you. But it just left me questioning, like, what am I doing? Like, this game is mostly playing itself. It is mildly engaging, but is it that much more engaging than Cookie Clicker? Because Cookie Clicker asks even less of me. And the numbers go up way faster in Cookie Clicker. So, I don't know. I think that this game manages to straddle the line between an active game and a passive game, and it manages to end up on the wrong side of both.
Yeah, that's fair.
All right. So, any closing thoughts on Loop Hero?
I feel like this game, I feel like we covered everything. There's just one last thing I want to say is that I feel like this was the, like, least impactful version of, like, resetting for a roguelite ever. That, like, the loop just gets, like, slightly misshapen. That's it.
Yeah. It's just what are the drops, and that's it. That's the whole game. What are the drops of the game? And any closing thoughts?
Like, the only thing that I think would make me go back to this game is there's a bunch of secrets, I suppose. Mm-hmm. Like, there's apparently a frog king that you can get if you make every tile a swamp.
Yeah.
Which sounds fucking miserable.
Nightmarish.
But is it worth getting the achievement? I don't know.
Did you see what the Swamp King, like, does?
No, what?
So his whole deal, he only has 2 HP. Each attack only does 1 HP of damage to him. And he's got a 99% evasion rate.
Jesus Christ.
So, on average, it's going to take 200 turns to kill him.
Cool.
Sure. Why not?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that decides it for me. I'm not going to go back to this game.
Yeah, I don't know. It's definitely intricate. It's designed. This is like one of those games where I have a hard time knowing, is this game well designed or does it have a design? Like, it definitely achieves what it seems to be going for. I don't know that I enjoy it. I don't know if it's difficult or easy. I don't know whether it's either. It felt like the game happened to me most of the time.
I don't know whether it's pretty or ugly either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I played this game and then I played One Step from Eden, and that's another game where I'm like, I don't know if this game is well designed or poorly designed. It's going to take me probably 20, 30 hours to know how to play it well, but is that good?
Am I having fun?
Am I having fun with this? I don't know. Like, I had to look up a lot of the different tile combinations in this game because there's no real reason to experiment other than just because you can. It felt like I should just keep, walking the same rut. And, maybe that's the lesson this game is trying to teach you. I don't think it is.
Maybe
But,
it's just like for some reason I got on a Minesweeper kick.
Hell
And
yeah.
you could just sit there and play Minesweeper over and over and over again. It's kind of like a mental stim. I wonder if this game is just one of those where it's like, I'm just going to sit here and let it happen to me for a while and we'll see what happens. Or if there's more to it. I don't know.
Yeah, there's strategy to Minesweeper. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a logic puzzle. I've gotten good at it too, honestly.
Same. Though I haven't played in a while. I should see before I say that I'm good at it. I should go back to the fields and get them clear.
I'd just always like to make the game crazy. Either like the most possible or least possible mines.
Yep. Minesweeper is a design puzzle. That's the
Yeah.
takeaway. All right, so that will do it for Loop Hero, which means it's now time for me to pick once again.
Pick Minesweeper, Gina.
Yeah,
Oh,
Minesweeper.
Fuck yeah. There's got to be some high stakes, like, someone has had to have made, like, roguelite Minesweeper, right?
Like Minesweeper with actual mines.
Oh, hell yeah. Someone has to have made... We'll look at that later.
We're going to put that on the shelf.
I'm going to do some research and find out if there's some sort of high stakes Minesweeper game. But instead, in honor of the PS3, PS Vita store closing, there was a PS Classic that I wanted to get a hold of. Fortunately, today I learned that that's not getting shut down.
It isn't?
But no, apparently Sony read all of the responses to their announcement and they decided, maybe we pissed some people off.
They all got a lot of money, I assume, because everyone was like, oh shit, the store's going down. I better buy everything.
I would assume that this last month of people thinking that the store was going down probably paid for a few more years of development.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I was going to pick this game because it was only going to be available for a little bit longer on the store. Now it's available forever, but it's still a game I've wanted to play. The game is Vagrant Story for the PlayStation 1. It is widely regarded as potentially the best-looking PlayStation 1 game ever made. It is in the Final Fantasy Tactics universe. It's in Ivalice. It is in some ways a spiritual, well, I think it's an actual sequel to Final Fantasy Tactics. Like, it's in the same world. So this might qualify as a ranking of fantasies. I'm not sure. We'll find out. But it's a game that I have tried to play before and then did not have enough time.
Is it vagrant, as in like a derelict? As
Yes.
a homeless man?
It's a story about a vagrant.
Okay. All right.
It's got that tactics thing. They're talking about the peasantry, you know.
That's true. Tactics is a game for us all.
Is it a tactics-like?
No,
Oh.
No, I'm suddenly much less excited.
very much not. It's an isometric action RPG.
Huh.
It was released in 2000, and if you look at the screenshots of this 21-year-old game, like some of the cutscenes of this game, it is astounding that this game was made on the PlayStation 1.
This is gorgeous.
It cannot be said enough that lighting engines did not exist.
Look at those butts.
Yeah,
So many butts.
there are a lot of butts. People got very wide hips.
Yeah, these characters are thick. I love it.
They are dummy thick, yes. So we're going to check out Vagrant Story. It is, honestly, just looking at screenshots of this game astound me. It's amazing that it's all rendered. Playing it, I don't remember what it plays like. I hope it plays well. So next time, Vagrant Story. Thank you, Pete.
Yeah, no, this was an interesting experience. I'm not sure. I'll have to ruminate on it.
Thank you, M.
Thank you. In the time it took you to listen to this podcast, you could have done like 5 or 6 loops. Should have been doing that while you were listening.
And thank you, listeners. Reminder, you can get in touch with the show at DeepListensPod on Twitter, deeplistens.libsyn.com. We have our comment sections, and deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. You can also support the show on patreon.com/deeplistens. Till next time, peace.
Break it down.